Welcome to tonight's P5Live Sessions session. What are we going to get into tonight? Always racking brain just before starting, thinking of what to play with. Still have intentions to get into doing VJ style audio reactive, but not quite ready with the setup. But until then, I think what I'm curious to play with is some noisy type. To play with the points of type, I don't think I've done a session yet messing with type, and it's always fun playing with the points of type. And then, yeah, I'm going to start out and just see what kind of weird things we can do with type, starting out with noise. So what I'm going to do is start from a demo, because I need the basic functionality of just converting it to points, and I don't keep that in my head all the time, and so I'm going to just, by start editing this thing, it will suddenly become a new sketch. So here I'm going to, instead of drawing circles, I'm just going to draw a point. There are the points. And then I can say stroke weight 5 so we can see these things. Okay, so this just cloned it. I'm actually going to rename it and just call it P5 Live Sessions noisy type. And this thing is listening to my every key that I press, because that's what that demo is made to do. But instead I'm going to ask it to just be an exact type for now. So I'm going to call it like txt equals type. We'll see if we play with uppercase or lowercase. And I'm going to tell it use txt, and I'm going to disable this on key press so that when I press keys it doesn't try to overwrite the type anymore. Okay, I think might be ready. Yeah, it's a question if this should be points, or if I should do a begin shape, end shape, end shape, and turn this into a vertex. Then I can get nice connected lines. That's a frustrating thing. Need to work on, or try to find a solution to. But the benefit is then we can see the forms if they like wobble around and move about. Let me copy paste and make one a point so we can keep those points. And first just mess around with the points so we can see what's happening. Let me double check that thing is running. It is. Okay. So what I think I want to do is have an array for all of these points, because at the moment they're just sitting there, and they have their x and y. No, actually I think I could just mess with them straight from that value. It might be nice to have an ability to reset them. So maybe I put like points OG so I can bring them back, and then I forget if the quickest way points OG equals points. I forget if there's a, I don't know, let me just say points, but I think then it's still connected to each other. I have to do something else to like actually make it a unique array. Okay, then I could already go through and mess with these points, and if I say like P plus equals noise frame count times 0.01 times 5. Whoops, and not P dot X. Okay, the thing just like slowly wobbles away, because it's never going in the minus direction, so it should be like that, minus 2.5, started over, maybe minus 2, and then it kind of has an ability to go back and forth. This is like all the type moving together, so I need to use some I in there. Ooh, that split it apart super fast. Start it over. Let me make these dots bigger. That happens way too quick. So I'm going to go to like 01. Still happens super fast. I think it's this number here. Nope. Kinda. It might be this number here. Splitting apart crazy fast. I know we want this number to be a bit high so it seems more spread out. And it's a question, yeah, those things move so fast, so maybe it's about, I should only do like, if it's that, I can go minus 0.5, so it's just like, has a little bit of ability to wobble around. Quickly breaks apart. Even divided by 2.2. Then it's just like kind of separating apart. Let me check it out with the vertex again. With a thinner stroke. Yeah, so these things look really jagged because these should probably be a curve vertex. It's still going crazy fast. Interesting, this needs to be such a small number to get it to take its time disrupting. And then I'm curious, this points OG, yeah, those are also getting manipulated, I believe. So I have to do something different to actually clone these so that there's something else. I think what I'm going to do is just say it equals an array and say for P of points OG dot push, create a vector, and it's going to be P dot X, P dot Y, and this should definitely be different arrays now. So I can check it by quickly throwing this in. Yep, it's back to normal, and now it's getting distorted, but that's the distorted one, so it can kind of have the ability to jump back and forth between technically the original one. I'm going to maybe add something to the Y at a different speed and everything. Test it out once with the fill. Not so nice. Go back to the points, see what that looked like again. Yeah, it's actually kind of a shame that they look so steppy. I want them just to not move very far, but actually to be a bit more fluid. So maybe it's about increasing these numbers. A little bit smoother. Okay. Now they're just a little bit alive, and maybe it'll be interesting to try and duplicate these things. So there's just a bunch of them overlaying each other, kind of filling out the page. See what I can do without the fan going too crazy. Let's see. Could also be interesting to connect the dots to aspects around the page, but first let's try and duplicate these things and see what happens. So I'm going to just do another loop. Let's try it off with 5 to start. Maybe I want to put that below that one. And now I need to pace these things out a bit. So I may want to do a push and a pop. And you could start out just by doing a scale. Do J times 1.1. Interesting. Okay, less 1.01. 0.01. Should just be something else than 1. 0.8. 0.4. 0.2. It's going in the other direction now. 0.6, yes, anything, I guess 0.5. 0.4. If I did some... It would already be interesting to see this in WebGL 3D space. What's it like if we have a bunch of these things? That probably kills my computer, but is interesting. 0.5. One downside is each of these are all connected to each other, so they're moving the exact same amount, which is not very much. If I go back to 2 and 5. Ooh, it's running off the page. Yeah, maybe it's interesting to make this a sine of frame count times point chaos 01 times 0.2 0.3, and then say 0.3 plus maybe. And make them all different, so say j times 5 plus. Ooh, we get some upside down type. It's not quite as centered as I hoped it would be. I'm going to go lowercase again. Let me give a slide background. Ooh, that gets fancy. Yeah, it's interesting, just the slight difference. Every single sketch have to turn on trace just so that it can leave a mark behind and not be the direct type or the direct vectors. So it's not so nice, this negative that it does, so maybe we have to do an absolute value of the size. Let me do like a ABS. And right now you can't really tell that there's this noisy type shifting. If I turn it off, so it's just as it is exactly supposed to be, we get zoomy type. Turn it back on and I'm going to let it get a little crazier. I feel like it could be a little bit more centered. That's a little bit better. And maybe this zoom, they need to be allowed to go even further apart from each other. Quite interesting with the zooming in, and just as it's about to fade back, the next one appears. Okay, that's way faster. Yeah, maybe it's interesting to let this type kind of move up and down altogether, so it's not always centered. So maybe it should be the center plus a sign of way too fast. As the fan kicks on and the computer starts to crap out a bit. It's not so happy about this. Let's just have like 2 of these things. And let them get much bigger. Maybe we need 3. Too far. Bouncy type. Yeah, so boosting this number is quite interesting, but it can only handle so much. So what if I just skip some of these points? All right, now we've totally separated away from type. It's based on type. It would be hard to tell. But that's always interesting to just use the type as a structure. Maybe it's interesting to keep one version of the type as it should be. Let me see what this is like. Maybe this will actually, I wonder what it'll be like if I do point shape instead of actually drawing points. Let me do a vertex p.x, p.y. Turn this off and then say points. Nope. Interesting. Yeah, I guess those points don't get zoomed because those translations don't happen to a vertex. That's a bummer. Okay, back how it is. Let me draw this one more time. And this will be a vertex at p.x, p.y. That is points. And they're going to have, on this one, it should be like all of them. So. All right, turn that off for a bit. Maybe remove this going up and down for a bit. Because these are points, you could also play with the stroke weight varying between them. Which could be something like let the different copies have different thicknesses. Or it's probably more interesting to let this stroke weight change based on j going through the type. So, or rather I times 0.2, 0.02. Okay, that's what a single one of these things look like. That's kind of like a firework. If this was frame count modulo points dot length plus, what does that do? Or maybe it's about the distance from the center. It could be like the dist of p dot x, p dot y from the center of the page divided by a huge number. We need less background. Stroke weight, and maybe make them have an opacity. Oops, that's the stroke weight. Where's my stroke? Stroke 255, 15. Maybe it's interesting to totally turn off this zoom and just check out bubble type. It's kind of nice. Slowly drifts off the page. And I'm curious if this distance is supposed to be that or simply 0, 0, because we translated, yeah, it's supposed to be 0, 0. So that's like the size of them based on how far away they are from the center. But maybe it's more interesting to be based on the mouse. Minus the translation we have. Could let this type get even bigger. And now I'm curious what it's like if we don't have a fill. No fill. And that is, right, we don't have a fill, we just have a super thick stroke, so this should be even smaller. No, what am I talking about? It's a point. I'm thinking of an ellipse. So let's copy, paste this, and make an ellipse. And maybe steal this little algorithm for its size. Now we're looking at type under a microscope. watching the organism grow and move. What is it like if we change? No, that's not opaque enough. 45, it starts to glow. That's quite interesting, this moment that happens if I move my mouse fast enough. This like repetition of these points. So that could be worth putting the loop on each of these points. So we see a bunch of them, or maybe they just need to like be pulsing and growing and shrinking. Because here I have this distance, so it could be simply this plus some kind of sign or noise. We said noisy type, so let's first play with noise. This was going to be like frame count times, slowing it down times 5 maybe. And this needs to get I in there somehow, although I don't see it changing. Oh yeah, there it goes. 35. Yep, now we can see it. Okay. So let me get I times 5 plus. So they're all different. Not sure if they should be fast or slow. If I take away this distance, let me say cut and just make that a variable so I can test it on its own. Let me call it let dist check equal this. And then I can choose to use it if I want. But yeah, that's also interesting, just having kind of like popping type. I think they should be allowed to get much bigger and slowed down. And they're wandering off the page slowly, so it's not quite being tracked as much as it should be. Whoops. Oh, we still have this center point, I think. Yeah, we can turn off this point. They have this little dot in the center. Now we just have their edges. This is also where it might be interesting to switch to P3D or WebGL and let those things like Z index fight and jump into each other's space because they're all sitting on the same plane. So I'm going to test that out. And I already changed the sketch quite a bit, but I'm going to call this, I'm going to clone it once, rename it to like noisy bubble type, and I'm going to clone it again and tell it that this one's going to be about WebGL. So I'm going to put myself in WebGL mode and disable the translate. And it's not happy. Why is it not happy? Where'd everything go? No ID not identified. Did I accidentally type somewhere? That's weird. Everything went poof. Ah, there's no, we can't do this, no. Ah, yeah, that's the bummer. That you don't get to do the fun fading effect when you are in WebGL. But that's okay. Let's see what happens with this z-index fighting. Instead, we're going to play with maybe fills instead of strokes. So I'm actually going to, for a minute, put it back to normal and say fill is 255, no stroke. Also kind of interesting. It's like smoky type. And then I'm going to tell each one of these things to be their own unique color. So maybe I switch. Oh, first let's just start with random colors. And then maybe I'd switch to HSL mode. So let's get some random red. Actually, it's black and white for now. And just do a random seed to stop that chaos. Okay, so it's not doing the Z index fighting that I thought it would. They're not really ripping into each other. Interesting. Let's spin around it. Orbit control 5. Ah, there it is. That's what I'm looking for, this weird fighting. So interesting. When it's like first rendered, we don't see it at all. And then if I just barely turn the object so it's in some perspective, then we get to see that stuff. Whoa, totally disappeared. Yeah, so that's something that's super fun to exploit. So maybe a way to really exploit it is to have a gigantic circle surrounding everything. Who knows what color that should be. Let's make an ellipse that is from 0, 0 to like width. Maybe even bigger, times 2. And this is going to have a random shade of gray. And now all that stuff is z-index fighting. Don't know if it's very interesting or very nice, but it's fun to see what that means. They freak out really fast. Interesting, this like start out normal, slight touch patterns. Ooh, if you put it at just the right amount, you can get different kinds of this z-index fighting. If I run it again, oh no, I forgot. Everything's going to be like fixed at this random, of course, because of random seed. So I could check out what a different color everything look like. I should probably put this in front of that call of random so that can also change. But for some reason, I don't know if it's a bug in P5JS, but I feel like when you are using random seed, the very first random that you ask for is like not random at all. It's super consistent. I'm going to test it by asking for another random. I'm going to say like stroke random 255, and then I'm going to say no stroke to turn it off. So now that's my first random, and now I think when I change this, I'm getting different backgrounds. Yeah, I'm not sure why that is. Maybe it's just something about the algorithm for calculating random. But this is almost like my burner random to actually get the real stuff happening down below. Ooh, there can get a lot or a little bit of these things. That looks very moire-like. Let's let these things get way bigger. Just to see what happens. If we can still read the type would be interesting. Not really. It's also worth, that's getting pretty slow and choppy. It's worth changing to stroke instead of fill and see if this z-index thing does something there as well. I don't think so. I think it's only when we're messing with surfaces. You can kind of still read what it says if you know what you're looking for. Then maybe it's interesting to play with that stroke and a little bit of like filled opacity. So then that like glitchiness will be kind of soft and not too transparent or too opaque. Yeah, we're in 3D space, so all these things get to revolve and spin around. So actually what I'm going to do is I'm in a push pop. So I'm going to translate to that position. Draw these things at 0, 0. So it should all be the same. And now I can do some rotation of them on like a Y or an X axis. So that like spins these things in this way, starts to look like a weird, and now they look like optic discs from glasses. It's maybe interesting just giving them a fixed, not that way, the other way. Suddenly becomes some kind of like forest. Yeah, they're just barely sticking out. 85. almost perpendicular, 90. It'd be interesting if we can read typo there, or type. Let me turn off this gigantic circle that's behind it. So this is what it's like if it's yeah, I think I can still read it. Depends a lot on the size of these things. The smaller they are, the easier we can read it. Let those discs get big. It's quite interesting having this stroke on it. I don't know if I've played with that much. Having a stroke on a fairly translucent facade gives it this kind of edge. I wonder what lights is like. Nice. Made a difference. Without lights, a little brighter. With lights, we have some shading. So now I think it'd be interesting if we could see the type a bit better just by rotating some of them. I like the bigger size. What's it like if we do rotate Y? And we need to separate them all, so I times 5 plus, just something to give them each different values. It's always a question, which one do you rotate first, the X or the Y? It makes a huge difference. Let me make a tiny number so they're just like kind of following each other. A little hard to tell what's happening. So if I turned off this X, that's what they're doing. Okay, kind of what I expected. Slow it down a bit, and then it's interesting to decide, like, how close are they all to each other while they do the spin. Maybe now I make this thing smaller. Oh, they're all, yeah, it's almost like revealing and then hiding themselves. For a split second, turning off the background. So it leaves a trace of this. And the stroke weight was set a long time ago. Where is stroke weight? Maybe it hasn't been adjusted. Oh, there's stroke weight 3. I'm going to turn that way down so we get more of a hairline. And I'm going to make the fill even more translucent so we can see through the stuff a little better. Yeah, they start to look like droplets. Maybe at a certain perspective we can emphasize that aspect. If I turn off this Y rotation, then we can have some perspective on them. Could also be interesting to push this into a legible water. You have kind of random dots going everywhere, but then somehow there is this message that you can read in the water. That could be fun. What I wanted to do was kick it off right away. There it is. With a rotate X 45 or negative 45. I always forget. No, I think that's right. I know, okay. That was before. There, that way I can start out the sketch and it's already at that perspective. Maybe it's worth slowing these things down a little bit. That's about this size here. And actually their fill should all be random. They're all the exact same amount of opacity. This should totally be down here to make them all unique. give them also like a random, whoops, and maybe also a random amount of opacity. No, they should all be fairly light. Maybe up to a certain, maybe just like up to 100, then they'll have a little bit of like flicker. Maybe that's not wanted. Okay, it might be time to give some other splashes throughout the space. I mean, I could really make this like water and have these actually really quickly. I can test it. Let's see what this looks like as water droplets if I just do a sine wave. And it needs to be like an absolute, no, maybe not even a sine, but like a tan that will like start over. Or will it? No, it seems to be acting like a, what did I do? I changed the absolute, wrong one. It was still a sine wave, and it freaked out. Oh, damn. Not happy calculating all that stuff, damn. Alright, back to sine wave. Damn, I guess tangents are heavy on the computer, can't quite do that. Okay, what I want to do though is we have this, I don't even need to. We're using random seed. Normally to get a bunch of other dots I'd have to make an array and then keep track of their positions. But this is kind of interesting that because we have a fixed random seed, what happens when I just say, no, I think they would be static then. I take it back, I think I need an array. Let's call it drops is an array. I'll mess around with how many there should be. Let's say, let's have 50 drops. Create vector random width, random height, and actually because this is WebGL, minus width divided by 2. Okay, so now we have a bunch of drops that are just random positioned. And I killed it. I have a typo, create random. Because I said drops. Let's call it drops. There we go. And then I would say I should draw those things first after I do this rotate. Let's just draw an ellipse where that thing is. Let D equal drops. Oh yeah, and give it a size, 5. And it has no fill and no stroke. No, it has a random fill. Let's see. 15. There it is. It's not, we're not seeing its shape or filling. Push. Pop. Fill 255. There they are. And they maybe need just like a similar, if not same, algorithm. Definitely something else. Oh yeah, right, we have background turned off. That's why those hung around. So these could be moving at their own speed. That's kind of a nicer speed than I had for this one. And maybe these should only have a stroke. No, actually they need to have both. Maybe we need a bunch more of them. Yeah, maybe it's nice for a minute to turn on this key press so I can test out typing a key. I cannot recognize that there's an A, there's a B, there's a C. You can kind of see it. Should probably be bigger. And actually these random dots should be allowed to go way further into the foreground and background. So they don't seem like they're taking up a square. There, now it's a bigger playground that they sit on. Everything is still in a 2D plane because originally it was fun to play with Z-axis fighting, but maybe now should instead play with the Z-axis. And maybe these dots should steal some code from this thing that lets those things move around a little bit. So that they're not too static, but instead move around. And they should have a fill that is random 255. And they're way too small. And they're noisy, they're not necessarily doing a whole lot. Actually, I think they were better, or they looked better with the background and without a fill. And maybe it is interesting letting those things rotate in an axis, so then they do kind of appear and say, hey, we're hanging out here. That's the y-axis. Breaking the perspective. Again, we can see these things a bit better if they're not quite so big. It's more legible, I think. Now they're blending in a bit more besides the rotation. Yeah, I don't know if rotation is such a good thing. It might be just more interesting that they just somehow look a little bit more organized than the other ones. Could tweak their speed and then they would definitely stand out from the others. Slow it back down. I'm still skipping a bunch of points. That was from earlier. Maybe it's worth drawing more of these points and then they'll be that much more articulated, if not too much. I think it's way too visible now. From the back. maybe it's interesting letting these things zoom up a little bit off the page. Let me start with the noisy ones and say, at the beginning when I created them, they should all have a Z as well. It starts out at 0. And then mess with their Z. And it's noisy at the moment. Yeah, let's leave it at so. And for this to use the Z, I have to translate instead. And now these things should be kind of wandering up and down. Probably nice without a background to see what their trails look like. Back to the petri dish. Yeah, I'm not so sure about this no background. It looks really nice for the center part, that it can leave this squishy form. But maybe that's also possible by just letting the stroke weight sometimes get really thick on them to give that appearance. Stroke weight is noise times 15. So they have the ability to be quite thick, but then they get all choppy. Bummer. They can have some shine, but they have this not so nice edge breakdown. Let me steal this value and call it let S, so I can play with the detail of them. And they don't have to be circles, they could be squares. They could be lines. Triangles. There we can see the depth of those other ones. It's probably nice also letting this type slowly break into the third dimension. Yeah, we're definitely growing something under the microscope here. But that's quite nice, having them already at the start be at different heights and depths. It's like then we're definitely looking at the water, and this stuff is happening underwater. That's an interesting illusion that starts to happen. Yeah, so I should definitely let this type also grow. I think when I create this type, it doesn't have a z-axis, so I might need to go through and say p dot z equals 0. I stopped using this clone of points, but now at least they all have a z, so that the z could also have a manipulation and see what happens. That just has to have some other kind of noise. And now let's add it to our translate. Start it over and watch what happens. Yeah, I feel like you can already see some of that texture happening. If I go flat, then we can watch it kind of lifting up, lifting up. Could also be interesting in the z-axis to let it grow faster. Whoops. Right, times 2 minus 1. There we go. Oh, so now it can really go up and down quite a bit faster. Yep, this edge thing is fun. They become like kind of weird, spokey things, but they're not quite as nice as that smooth circle. So I'm going to go back to, try to go back to that. But first, let's check out squares. That's also kind of cool. Yeah, this makes such a difference when you're just moving around a little bit. Like when it's in one position, it's interesting how they kind of disappear and you lose track of what you see. But the minute you move it, our eyes can really separate it. Yep, we've got to go through all the numbers and check out triangles, lines. Nope, just a bunch of lines. Pentagons. All right, I want to go back to just plain old circles. And it was about the stroke weight that made it all of a sudden look like that. So this is what it's like without being able to see those edges. These things have totally wandered away, so it's like it's slowly sinking. Maybe needs a little bit brighter color. It'd be interesting. I have my random, this is about the opacity. Maybe it should be allowed to get up to 150 or even 255. So some of those things can be a bit brighter down there. Take a look at a couple angles. Yeah, WebGL is wild. Playing with the orbit control, you're just so quickly in a 3D world. Okay, I'm going to restart it so everything starts out flat again, and then, whoops, I can see how quickly these things separate apart from each other. Let's start it over at some perspective. Now it's a little bit like a film. You can watch this thing slowly bubble and sink, I guess. I could hide the cursor so we don't have to see it. Control C toggles that thing on and off. And I'll test again what it's like if I let myself type another key. I think I'm going to let it be much bigger. So if I do like an H, hello. Yeah, so this is kind of interesting. Back to, it's like built off that very first demo where we could type anything out, numbers, whatever. We can press the command key or control key, alt, option, control, shift. It's not filtering for those, so now we have a meta key, which is nice, the command key. And I think if I hold down control, but then it's going to activate the thing. Now we have control. I think I can zoom. Nope. How do I zoom in and out? Oh, there. Ah, okay. I just have to press the scrolly thingy. So we have meta. Yeah, that's super nice where these things float off the surface. I think that could be optimized a bit to make some of them, it seems like all of them are just rising. They're not sort of some going above and below. So that should probably be fixed just by tweaking this thing. I think it's this fact here. There, below I had it ×2 -1. Start it over, wait for it. There they go. Some above, some below. And that probably also helps for, yeah, just the amount of depth that this thing has. Can't take a picture of meta because I pressed the control key. Bummer. And one last time I'm going to turn off the background just to see what happens when we like now stretch this canvas all over the place. So I'm going to have meta and drag that thing around and we can cause chaos and fill the canvas super quick. And then you can have just like a rich background and let it kind of bubble on top of that. Or start it over. But in this case, I think it all looks better with a background. Yep. Thanks for hanging out, watching a P5Live session, messing around with type and noise. I'll be back next week, Tuesday, 9 p.m. Central European Time. Ciao.